Welcome to Rat Style Review or Music is Live podcast, depending on where you're watching this show. This is your host, Lou Mavs, and we have Manny Mejias from Rat Style Review on the show with us today. Manny, how you doing?
Not bad. How you doing?
Doing great. Manny and I are proud to welcome to the show our very special guest. He's one of the preeminent journalists in hard rock and heavy metal. From his days as a writer for Sounds and Kerrang! Magazine, he also ran publicity campaigns for many of the classic hard rock and metal bands, from Thin Lizzy to Black Sabbath. Since 1998, he's the editor of Classic Rock Magazine and has written many books, including Run to the Hills, the Authorized Biography of Iron Maiden, Market Square Heroes, the Authorized Biography of Marillion, and his recent outputs, Rainbow in the Dark, an autobiography on Ronnie James Dio, which I ordered from Premier Collectibles. So it's authenticized and autographed by Miss Wendy Dio, which is pretty cool.
Wow. Fantastic.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased to welcome on board from the United Kingdom, Mr. Mick freaking Wall. Sir, welcome aboard. How are you?
I'm good. What an introduction. Thank you so much. I turned the light on because I realized I was kind of hidden in darkness there, as always. But I mean, not you need to see a little more probably. So anyway, so great to be here. Where would you guys like to start?
Well, first
Lou,
of all,
I'll let you take it.
Thank you, Manny. First of all, we'd like to ask you, how has life been going for you since lockdown started?
Well, blimey, how long have you got? Same as everybody.
That's up to you.
It's a saga, I was actually on tour in March 2020 when the shit hit the fan. I had ghosted the memoir of a guy called Francis Rossi, who doesn't mean really much anything really in America, but big in Canada and Australia and Germany, places like that. But here in the UK, his group Status Quo, have had 106 hit singles, 42 hit albums. They were the band that opened Live Aid in London back in 1985. They're an absolute household name here. Anyway, I ghosted his memoir in 2019. Huge hit, #1 bestseller. And 1 year later, the paperback came out. And we were doing a big book tour, and we were 4 shows into a 56-show tour. And you know what I'm going to say. The bug arrived, and Britain went into, I don't know what the timeline was in the USA, but here the end of March, last week of March, the whole country went into the most awful lockdown. And I was in trouble because that 11-week tour was going to set me up financially so I didn't have to worry for the rest of the year, even though I'd be working. And of course that went, and suddenly it reminded me, when I was a kid, I remember I was going to an outdoor swimming pool when I was about 7, and one of my friends pushing me in the deep end, and I couldn't yet swim. Man, I shot out of that pool like a rocket. The hands, the legs, it was just an instinctive thing. I'm thrown in, whoosh, I practically flew out of the pool. And it was a bit like that with lockdown. I mean, I was in trouble, and what can I do from home? I can write books. So since then, I've written 4 books. One is a ghosted memoir of Doc McGee, famously Kiss's manager these days.
Mm-hmm.
But in the past, Bon Jovi, Motley Crue, Scorpions, Skid Row. Then you get to Diana Ross, James Brown, Mink DeVille. Oh my God, Hootie and the Blowfish. I mean, forever. And also, of course, famously convicted for smuggling, hundreds of tons of marijuana into the US.
Convicted, not alleged, ladies and gentlemen. It's a fact. Look it up.
Oh, no, absolutely. And he makes absolutely no bones about it. But great fun part of the book is him talking you through it. Meetings with Noriega. I mean, come on.
I didn't know got that funny detail. Whoa.
Yeah, he's like half Irish, half Italian. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, so that was good. That had been begun the previous summer, 2019. I've spent a lot of time with Doc in LA and Nashville and Miami and lots of other places. And it's an incredible book. The deal we did is that Doc chooses when it comes out, because back in 2019, there was talk of it's still happening. There's going to be a documentary based around the book. There was whispers of maybe a Netflix series or a movie or blah, 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 blah. But that's all in Doc's hands. And of course, once this COVID thing happened, all those plans got backburnered. So that will happen, hopefully next year, but that's one of the most fun, crazy, outrageous stories I've ever worked on. He is a fantastic guy to sit down with. But I also did the Ronnie James Dio memoir. Again, there it is. I mean, that was begun in terms of research and so forth, again, back in 2019, towards the end of 2019. I was over in LA at Wendy's house and going through this unbelievable archive she has. I mean, it's like an Aladdin's cave. You know, she's got the trumpet that Ronnie played when he was just a little boy, and pictures of him as a small child, and books, and oh my God, and lots of interviews. So that was begun then, and of course by the time the lockdown hit, I think I had actually already begun writing it, but that got accelerated real fast because there was nothing else to do. So it kind of worked well, but it took a while. And that book, as you know, came out just a few months ago. And I also I've been just finished working with a guy called Stephen Wilson.
From Porcupine Tree.
Porcupine Tree. Yeah.
Yes. He's got a big solo career here these days. Although he has, while we were doing the book this last year and this year via Zoom, he's recorded the first Porcupine Tree album for I think 11 or 12 years. That's going to come out next year. He's finishing his solo album, came out this year. I think it went to like number 3 in the charts. We were into our third lockdown at that moment, so it all just turns into mist, doesn't it? But he's doing his new solo album. That was an amazing thing to do because he'd been approached for years to do a book and always said no. He didn't want to do I was born and then this happened and then that happened. He wanted to do something more like his music. He wanted to do something more experimental. So it's not chronological. Page 1 of the book, I think, begins at the final Porcupine Tree show at the Albert Hall in London in 2010. Anyway, for me, it's one of the best things I've ever worked on. It was a genuine collaboration. He wrote some of it. It wasn't just me having to do all the heavy lifting and then put the words down in his voice. He was shoulder to shoulder with me. Extraordinary. That comes out in March. And I could probably be here all day telling you the stuff, and now you're sorry you asked. So there's other stuff. But where do you want to go next?
My first introduction to you was on the VH1 show Behind the Music, where you were interviewed on artists such as Ozzy Osbourne and Def Leppard. We actually just had Lorelei Shellis and Helen Collin on the network last month, and they were wonderful. So,
wow. What's Lorelei doing these days?
Happily married, living in California, and Helen and Phil and Lorelei and her husband Larry are great friends. And
good.
I keep in touch with both Lorelei and Helen, wonderful women. On YouTube, there's also classic footage of you from the Monsters of Rock TV show, where you've practically interviewed everyone from the world of rock and metal that ever meant anything to fans, including
quite a few that didn't. Well, that's also part of the gig.
You interviewed Mama's Boys, which is one of my all-time favorites. So,
oh, wow, yep. Mama's Boys.
Oh my God, dude! Power and Passion is one of the greatest albums ever from the '80s. And
what I remember from them is they did a cover of Slade's "Come On, Feel the Noise," but I thought they were covering a Quiet Riot song because I hadn't heard of Slade yet.
Correction, it was Mama, We're All Crazy Now.
Right.
They did, you know what's a better cover than that? Their cover of Sham 69's If the Kids Are United. So
I thought that was better than the Sham 69.
Thank you.
It wasn't so that Cockney London thing, which you either love or hate, you know. Mama's Boys did a great version, rocked its ass off. The singer of Mama's Boys, God, I can't remember his name.
John McManus.
Yes, John. I bumped into John for the first time in at least 30 years. The very last time I was in Los Angeles, which was sort of February 2020. He hasn't changed one bit. That guy must have a painting in an attic somewhere that's just dripping flesh and blood and stuff, because he looks the same as he did 30 years ago. It's kind of sickening, you know.
He might be a descendant of Elizabeth Bathory, but we can't prove that. With the interviews that you did for Behind the Music and your show Monsters of Rock that was on TV in the 80s, with the constant interviewing of bands that were on the rise, bands that had already been established, was this something that just came naturally for you? or did you kind of feel the pressure of like, okay, we're on to something kind of big that's hot at the moment?
Not really. I became a published music journalist when I was 19, and that was back in October 1977. I first started doing the Monsters of Rock show on Sky TV, Rupert Murdoch's station. Back in 1985, I was 26, coming up to 27. So that was 7 or 8 years. I'd already been in the biz. I'd written for Sounds. Left and come back a couple of years later. I've been writing for Kerrang for a couple of years, but I've written for a lot of other magazines and newspapers. But more crucially, I went to work for a publicity company called Heavy Publicity. And I left Sounds to do that when I was about 20. And Heavy Publicity did Sabbath when Ozzy was in the band. So inherited Dio being in the band. Sabbath, Thin Lizzy, REO Speedwagon, Dire Straits, Styx, Ted Nugent, Journey, Rush, and also groups like Ultravox and The Damned and some other stuff. But it was called Heavy Publicity, and it was heavy. And I had to get to know all the artists, and it wasn't like going in to interview them. And if it's someone's whose music you like, it's a buzz, you know. But that isn't always the case, you know. You don't get straight in to meet your all-time hero with your first interview. But when I became their publicist, you're not in that room for an hour or 2 hours, or on the road for a day or 2 days or 3 days. You're there all the time, and shit gets real. So by the time I got to Monsters of Rock in 1985, wheeling on rock stars, I used to sit there and take the piss. I mean, I used to, if they weren't funny or interesting, I'd get them off again really quick. I did always take it seriously, but I wasn't in the remotest bit awed. You know, I mean, I was older than a lot of them. You know, I'm older than Def Leppard, you know. But the ones that got it, like Joe Elliott, funnily enough, he came on a fair bit and it was hilarious. I'd have Bruce Dickinson on, who I'm exactly the same age as, when he was Bruce Dickinson. He would guest for me when I went on vacation. They just were people I knew. Now, if it had been, I mean, I had Jimmy Page on the show. That was a little bit different. That was exciting. But by the time he came on the show, we'd already met a few times. So again, if you look at the clip, I'm making fun with him. And so, no, I found it very, very easy. The more I did it, the easier it got. I got a bit too relaxed sometimes. I mean, we had Bow Wow, you know, the Japanese group on.
Yeah, Nightless Cities. I remember them.
There you go. And they were a good band, you know.
Yeah, they're like a Deep Purple of Japan, in my opinion, with
Very
a
much.
Yngwie type of guitarist. I remember. Anyway.
Oh, they love Blackmore and Yngwie in Japan. So they're guests on the show, and we show a video and more chat, and then a video, and then it's thank you and bye. They've gone while the video's playing, and you know, I've said thank you, goodbye, and they put the video on, and we come back. And it's all live. And I go, oh, what a video. What a band. Big thanks to Loudness for coming on today. One of the...
You didn't.
Fucking did. And didn't even know I'd done it. I could see, like, you know, when you see people behind the cameras, they're like,
Yeah.
you know, like, I'm thinking, what the fuck's wrong with them? Yeah. Why are Loudness still hanging around? You know? And so it came to the end because they're very polite. And there's a bit of whispering and bowing, and you know, and the producer comes up to me and goes, "Fiery Irish woman," and she goes, "You fucking idiot! That's not fucking Loudness." Fuck. I said, "Well, who is it then?" She goes, "It's fucking Bow Wow." Oh, you have that's what I said. You didn't fucking say that. You said Loudness. Yeah. I said, "What are we gonna do?" She said, "We're gonna have to reshoot that bit." And I went, "Oh, fucking hell." I said, "Well, can you at least put them back in the dressing room?" She said, "They're being pretty good about it. I think we'll just leave them alone." So we shot the whole thing. And I said, "Oh, one of the greatest bands out of Japan. One of my favorites. My thanks to Bow Wow. Great guys. Hope to see them again soon." So, yeah. So a little too relaxed sometimes. But no, I really did enjoy it. It was terrible. I hated it the first year or so because I was no good at it. And then they were having a 3-week break, and I brought in a resignation letter because I thought 3 weeks will give them a chance to get someone else. And this is in the days when cable and satellite TV in the UK it's fuck all. You know, it's not like, say, you know, I'm on NBC with the nightly talk show. You know, it's not the Tonight Show. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
3 weeks to get poor sap in to do it. You know? And that was the first time I enjoyed it. It was really funny. I think because I knew it was my last and I was leaving, I would never have to do it again. And it was fun. And I was walking back to the tube station and I realized I still had the letter in my back pocket. And I nearly turned round to go back and go, and I went, 3 week break coming up. I went, fuck it, I'll give it to them next time. See how it goes next. And I carried that letter in my pocket for about 6 weeks. I used to wear the same jeans. And I didn't give it in. From that moment on, I started to enjoy it. And I think the viewers enjoyed it more as well. Do you know, when Sky went mainstream in the UK in '89 and they suddenly had MTV on 24/7. They only made 6 music shows and mine was one of them. And so they just cancelled them. When I first started on Sky, the most popular show on the channel was Mr. Ed the Talking Horse. Okay?
Oh, for the love
of
God.
It was Mr. Ed the Talking Horse, Topless Darts, The Monsters of Rock show, and, you know, some pop shit, generic crap. The Chart Show, when we got cancelled 3.5 years later, no email in those days, okay? And we didn't just get like postcards or letters, you know, we'd get these burned at the edges posters and crosses and all this stuff. We used to have a thing called Rogues Gallery, which we'd put them all up in for the show. They got over 5,000 of these protesting that the show was going off air. And I got to tell you, even in those days when there was no email, 5,000 for a tiny cable show. The next most popular music show got 6, and that was the Chart Show. So it didn't mean much in terms of money, but the fact that you could tell the audience loved the humour. You know, they say, you know, if you want to hear a great Irish joke, get an Irish guy to tell it. You want to hear a great Jewish joke, get a great, I mean, just get it. There's so many. Get a great Jewish comedian to tell you that joke. You're going to laugh like you never laughed before. Same with Italian, whatever. And I felt like that with heavy metal. You know, I really loved the stuff. I loved the spirit. It was so non-80s. And it was so not English and fucked up and weird, you know. It was expansive, heartfelt, fucking funny, dirty, naughty, X-rated, some of it. Yeah, that to me was what rock and roll was always meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
And clearly lots of people, young people feel like that. Of course they do. So I think they liked the show. It wasn't always dependent on what videos we played. And I was rubbish. We had a rival on Music Box, the other music channel, called The Power Hour. And that was presented by Dante Benuto, a friend and a colleague on Kerrang. But his show was always about, he used to talk like this. And he would say, I have the Man of War tour dates. And he'd start reading them out. You know what I mean? This is their 8th album and a live double recorded earlier this year in Tokyo. It's excellent. So that was
Walter Cronkite with a British accent.
I love Dante. We're still friends all these years later, but that's how he talks, and that's how his mind works. I would rarely talk about the music, had no fucking idea about the tour dates, didn't fucking care. We just had fun. How can you play a David Lee Roth video followed by even Bon Jovi, who was so vanilla, you know, but even they were funny. Poison, you know, Motorhead, Man of War, AC/DC. I mean, Dio, for fuck's sake, you killer. And even when it's not, you know, like Wasp, funny. Bow Wow posing as Loudness, funny, you know.
Yeah.
So no, I found it very easy once I gave up trying. I think that's been the key to my success. Don't try.
Just have fun doing it. Sorry, man, go ahead.
Mick, I discovered you through Kerrang! Magazine as imports as a kid. Matter of fact, you and a guy named Malcolm Doan were the first journalists that seemed to take heavy metal hard rock serious, at least in my world.
Yeah, agreed. Rest in peace, Malcolm.
The magazines I read, and you're probably not familiar with them. Hit Parader, which we used to call Shit Parader, Circus.
And
they were aimed at kids, kids, but you guys were the first to take it seriously. I mean, nowadays everyone loves Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Alice Cooper, but that wasn't that way when I was a kid. Magazine like Rolling Stone, Spin in the 80s began. Anyway, all these critics hated them, and you two and the rest of your writers are the first ones that I know took the music seriously. Even Led Zeppelin, who's now loved, and your book points out that you wrote years ago, weren't so loved when they came out. People forget that. So.
Definitely not. I mean, none of those bands got a good time first time around. Certainly not in the 80s when it was the most unfashionable look, sound,
right.
Post-punk and Reagan and Thatcher and shoulders and manicured hair. It just wasn't what that world was about. They get a lot better press now, but you're right. I'll tell you a story about Malcolm because bless his heart, he did die, some weeks ago. Broke my heart. He hadn't been well for a long time, so I can't say it was a huge surprise, but it was a shock. I met Malcolm. I have the dubious honor of kind of paving the way somewhat for Malcolm. Back in 1980, heavy publicity. I was the press agent for Hawkwind. I don't know if you are familiar with Hawkwind.
Lemmy's original band, yeah.
Yeah, the Grateful Dead of England.
Spot on.
We know.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Lemmy used to say to me, Pink Floyd were like a spaceship and they just, traveled the galaxies and were amazing. And he said Hawkwind was like a broken down spaceship. We just fucking crash landed onto your planet and fuck knows, So I'm doing their press. And in those days in the UK, there were 4 weekly music magazines: Sounds, Melody Maker, Record Mirror, NME, New Musical Express. No Kerrang yet. And NME wouldn't touch Hawkwind at that point. They wouldn't go near them. Melody Maker, they're not Queen, they're not Zeppelin, we don't care. Sounds, yes, Sounds were solid because they were really rootsy. They were writing about Kiss and AC/DC, and they were fine. But Record Mirror, we didn't even bother with because they were it was all paper in those days. But like Rolling Stone, the cover paper was color. But it was pop stuff. It was, David Cassidy, not in 1980, but Donny Osmond, kids. What were they called? The in the 80s in America,
Tiger Beat and stuff like that.
There you go. So you didn't even bother talking to them about Hawkwind. Are you fucking kidding? And then Alf Martin, their editor, rang me one day and said, "You guys are doing Hawkwind?" I went, "Yeah." He said, "It's just that we've got this new guy who I want to come in and write about heavy metal for us." And I'm like, "What?" Didn't make any sense, but I'm like, fantastic. The new wave of British heavy metal was starting to boom, and I think Record Mirror wanted a piece of it. So he said his name is Malcolm Dunn. I said it'd be his first interview. I said, fine, bring him over, man. He's great. Heavy publicity in 1980. I know people, it was a different world, It was a different world. Cocaine was like champagne, Weed was like offering a cup of tea, We used to bill the bands for all the drugs under the heading champagne and flowers for the band. But if we turned up at the show or at a meeting or a studio or whatever, we didn't have coke. Oh, boo, boo. What are those guys doing? So coke was just the thing. It was the fucking 70s and 1980 or whatever it was. So we used to show people a good time. That was how we used to get favourable press for our bands. We would sometimes sellotape grams of cocaine that you pull out the sleeve of the records in the paper and tape it. You don't call it sellotape, but sticky tape.
Adhesive.
So we're ready to rock. This is the new heavy metal writer on Record Mirror. It was like a fucking unicorn coming to the office. So we're going to take fucking good care of this guy. In walks Malcolm Dome. Malcolm Dome circa 1980, when he's still, I think, like a senior editor on a science journal. And he's got the YAML car, and is just the most, he's a big bowl of Jewish, and he's absolutely delightful. And we totally misread the tone, because the minute he comes in, we're going, hey man, have some Coke, Chuck, you just got chai, man, come on, yeah. And Malcolm's like, oh, no thank you, no thank you, no thank you. No thank you. We hadn't heard no thank you since 1973, you know. We went, okay, man. So I'm sure we had a few rolled already. Someone probably just, oh, no thank you, no thank you. Okay,
so he was straight edge pretty much then.
100%. We couldn't get him to drink a thing. But this is not computing. We don't feel someone is okay unless we've smothered them in hospitality. I said, well, what are you into? There must be something. I just would like to make you feel at home. You know what he said? Donuts. I like donuts. I'm thinking, is he actually fucking with my mind? But we send the secretary out, and of course, because we're so excessive, we can't. She brings back a tray of like 12 different, you know, flavors and kinds, you know. And we're like, there's your fucking donuts, rock and roll, you know. And he went, just that one. Well, so he was very strange. He was a lovely, lovely guy. And to concertina this, there was a very small, what they called a poster magazine, would fold out into a poster, called Metal Fury. Mm-hmm. I was the editor, writer, secretary, make the coffee guy. And I just needed a little bit of help. You only needed 3 or 4 stories a month and some reviews and just a little bit of hustling. And I called Malcolm. And by then, the Record Mirror gig had ended for whatever reason. I guess the new wave of British heavy metal had petered out a bit. And he came in and was fantastic, so much energy. Would work for nothing if he had to. And then I left that, and he took over as the editor, writer, tea guy, you know. Cut to a couple years later, and I need a gig. And I know he's on Kerrang, and I've known about Kerrang for a couple of years. It's on my radar. In fact, I was in Kerrang. People talk about the birth of Kerrang. Have you heard the story of the actual birth of the word Kerrang? Because it wasn't issue 1 or the pre-issue 1 or the original colour spread that appeared in Sounds with the headline Kerrang. Here's how it came about. In like 78, you had punk, reggae, metal, soul, whatever. And there were these little factions in Sounds that was the reggae guy, that was Jeff Barton was the Kiss guy, you know. And actually, this is the early 80s. After I'd left Heavy Publicity, I'm back at Sounds. And there was Gary Bushell, who used to write about like Sham 69 type stuff. We used to call it oi oi. So switchboard would put calls through, and it wasn't coordinated in those days. A phone would ring on, could be anybody's desk, and you picked it up. And we just, for fun, without even thinking, developed a shorthand. So if Gary took the call, it'd be oi oi. You'd know you were talking to Gary. And if you spoke to Eric Fuller, this really posh guy, boarding school money, posh guy, but really into reggae, white guy. If he picked up the phone, he'd go, bompa diddly. And you knew, yeah, not even a good Bob Marley, bompa diddly.
Couldn't he just say Irie? That would have gotten the point across.
Then there was Jeff Barton and me. Or first it was Jeff and Pete Mikowski, then Pete Mikowski left, and I sort of became his replacement. Not specifically or deliberately, but just happened that way. And when we picked up the phone, we would go, Krang, or sometimes dang, or blang, or if you're tired, yang, you know, you go, Mick, yeah. So that's how it came about. And when we did, Jeff and I planned the first ever colour feature as a centerfold in Sounds, which I bailed out of to join Heavy Publicity. So it was the late 70s. Anyway, no, I was thinking of the new wave of British heavy metal. No, Kerrang was like 80, 81. Yes, I had. I just said, you know what you should call it? And he said, I'm way ahead of you. Kerrang. I went, yeah. I didn't think he'd go for it. It just seemed like a stupid name. But we only ever thought there'd be like one issue or two, you know, two. But so that's how that started. Anyway, so Malcolm's now working at Kerrang in 83, and I needed a gig, and I call him. And he's so lovely. They don't actually need anyone. I'm a bit of a has-been at this point. But he's like, yep, no, well, if you have any good ideas, you know, that shit. And I said, well, what anything you're particularly looking for at the moment? And he said, S's 90125 album had just come out. They couldn't get an interview. And I knew Trevor Rabin because Trevor had produced one of the records of one of the bands I'd worked with at Heavy. And of course, we'd, yeah. So long story short, I got hold of Trevor and I interviewed him. And that was the first story I ever had printed in Kerrang, and everything kind of went from there. But that was Malcolm. So it's and as the years went by, radio and other magazines, we our paths really interfaced for a long time. But he was one of the most extraordinary people, as well as rock or metal writers ever. He had an encyclopedic knowledge about metal. I was once in Los Angeles, this has got to be late 80s, 89, 90, and I'm sitting around a pool with Malcolm and Bo Hill, the guy that used to produce the
Rat albums, yep.
I think Winger maybe, and some others. And I've got a copy of Billboard, and just because we're bored, I'm going through the Hot 100 and just throwing names out. And Malcolm, it was like Wikipedia. It was Malcolmpedia before there was Wikipedia. He just reeled it off. He knew the producer, the label, the history. And Bo Hill is sitting there, who knew him well. He said, Malcolm, why aren't you an A&R guy? Why are you wasting your time writing about this stuff when you know more about the business and the bands? You know, some of these records you're telling us about, I don't even know what they are. And Malcolm, so not interested. He was not interested. He just wanted to work with the musicians and write about music. And he didn't want to kind of be that grown up in the room, even though, you know, he was quite a, you know, had quite great standing. He really did. He was very loved by everybody.
I've always appreciated his enthusiasm for the bands that he spoke and wrote about. So yes, I agree with you. We're currently wrapping up part one of our interview with Mick Wall, but Mick has been kind enough and gracious enough to say that he had a great time with me and Manny, and he's going to come back around for a part two. And we're hoping to have Wayne Noon and Greg Noggle, the other hosts from Ratsai Review, on board. And I just want to say, Mick, it's been great, this first introduction between you and I. I'm very grateful that we had this, and I'm looking forward to round two, where we'll have the entire Ratsai Review gang.
Well, listen, I'm delighted to be here, Lou. It's taken too long, but like I say, I'm like Dracula. Now you've invited me in, you know, it's going to be carnage, and you just won't get rid of me.
Well, as long as the Dam's in the background playing the song Nasty, I'll be happy. Yes, I'm a Young One fans too. Don't forget, buy his book, Rainbow in the Dark, the authorized biography of Ronnie James Dio, co-written by Wendy Dio and by Mick Wall. Get it. It is out now, and it's a great read. Mick, any website you want to throw out?
My Patreon site is where a lot of great stuff is going on at the moment. Pods, articles, videos, merch, pictures. A lot of great writing that isn't published anywhere else, and some pods that aren't published anywhere else. There is the Mick Wall podcast, which goes out every week for free on Spotify, Apple, Acast, all that stuff. And my official Facebook page, my name with that tick.
All links in the description below. Mick Wall, Good sir. Thank you so much for stopping by Route Side Review Network and Music is Life podcast. It's a pleasure. All the best to you. Wishing you a very happy Christmas.
And I'll see you again soon, I hope.
Definitely. And remember, all art is valid. RouteSideReview.com, MusicIsLifePodcast.com. Mick, have a great night. And thanks for tuning in, everyone. Take care.